On that autumn night, the convent of San Giovanni Rotondo was wrapped in a dense, almost palpable stillness. The wind blew hard across the barren hills of Apulia, carrying with it the scent of dry earth and wild rosemary. Padre Pio had remained in the chapel long after Compline, kneeling in his usual place under the dim light of 3 candles set upon the side altar. His gloved hands rested on a wooden rosary worn smooth by decades of use, and his lips whispered prayers for the dead, especially those who no longer had anyone on earth to intercede for them. "Lord," he murmured in a hoarse, weary voice, "have mercy on the forgotten souls, on those who departed without comfort, on those who never knew peace." The candle flames flickered violently, though there was no draught in the chapel. Padre Pio slowly opened his eyes, sensing a change in the air, as if the very space around him had contracted, holding its breath. At first, he thought fatigue was playing tricks on him. At 62 years of age, his body, marked by the stigmata and by long nocturnal vigils, was demanding its toll. But then something moved in the shadows near the side door. A shape began to materialize there, indistinct at first, like mist slowly condensing. It was not tall, perhaps about 5'3", a feminine silhouette that seemed woven from the very threads of darkness. Padre Pio did not blink or move. He had seen many things throughout his life, visions of heaven and hell, spiritual battles fought in the solitude of his cell, but this was different. The figure took a step forward, and the friar noticed details that made him catch his breath. She was a young woman, perhaps 25 years old, with dark hair falling untidily over her shoulders. Her face was pale, almost translucent, and her large, dark eyes bore a sorrow that seemed rooted deeper than death itself. But what most drew Padre Pio's attention was her womb, visibly rounded beneath the simple dress she wore. She was pregnant, or had been. "Father," the voice came out as a hoarse whisper, laden with pain. "Father Pio." The friar felt a shiver run down his spine, not of fear, but of profound compassion mixed with reverent awe. He had been sought out by many souls over the years, but never like this, never with such clarity, such an almost tangible physical presence. "Who are you, my daughter?" he asked in a firm yet gentle voice, making the sign of the cross. The woman placed her hand over her womb in a protective, instinctive gesture, like all mothers do. "My name is Elena," she said, her voice trembling. "Elena Marchetti. I came because I no longer know where to go, because no one prays for me, because my baby never had the chance to breathe." Padre Pio felt a sharp pain in his chest, as if an invisible blade had pierced his heart. He knew that pain, the pain of mothers who lose their children, the anguish of those who depart before their time. But there was something more in Elena's presence, something he could not yet identify, a darker shadow hovering around her. "Elena," he said, rising slowly and approaching with care, as though she were a fragile being who might dissolve at the slightest abrupt movement. "Tell me," he said softly, "tell me what happened to you." Elena raised her eyes to him, and in that gaze Padre Pio saw not only sorrow, but terror, a terror so deep that not even death had been able to erase it. "I am afraid," she whispered. "I am afraid that if I speak, he might still be able to reach me, that he could harm my baby, even now." "Nothing can harm you here, my daughter," Padre Pio assured her, his voice filled with spiritual authority. "You are under the protection of our Lord. No darkness can touch you in this sacred place." But Elena only shook her head, stepping back. "You do not understand, Father. He is not just a man. He has power. He has influence. He made everyone believe that I simply disappeared, that I ran away, that I abandoned everything." Padre Pio felt an anger begin to boil in his chest, a righteous indignation against those who abused their position to commit evil. "Who, my daughter? Who did this to you?" Elena opened her mouth to answer, but a sound echoed through the chapel, a dull, distant noise, as though something heavy had fallen on the floor above. Elena's form trembled violently, growing fainter. "He is watching," she whispered, her eyes wide with panic. "Even now he is watching." And then, before Padre Pio could say anything more, she vanished like smoke carried by the wind, leaving behind only the echo of her voice and the almost imperceptible scent of violets, the flowers she had loved in life. Padre Pio could not sleep that night. He remained in his austere cell, kneeling before the small crucifix on the wall, praying for Elena's soul and for the child she had carried. The wounds in his hands throbbed more intensely than usual, as they always did when powerful spiritual forces were at work. At dawn, after the morning mass, he sought out Padre Agostino, his confessor and longtime friend. He found the elderly friar in the cloister, walking slowly among the stone columns. "Padre Agostino," he called, his voice carrying an unusual urgency. The old friar turned around, and when he saw the expression on Padre Pio's face, his own features wrinkled with concern. "What happened, my son?" Padre Pio recounted the nocturnal encounter, every detail etched into his memory as if it had been branded there with a hot iron. Padre Agostino listened in silence, nodding occasionally, his eyes never leaving the face of his younger confrere. "Elena Marchetti," Padre Agostino murmured when Pio finished. "That name sounds familiar to me. Let me check." He went to the convent's small library and returned minutes later with an old newspaper, yellowed by time. The date was from 6 months earlier. "Look here," he said, pointing to a small notice in the lower corner of the page. "Woman missing in San Giovanni Rotondo," read the headline. "Elena Marchetti, 24, married, was last seen leaving her home on the morning of March 15th. Family members say she may have run away due to marital problems. Police are investigating." Padre Pio read the notice 3 times, each word driving itself into his mind like a nail. "Marital problems," he repeated bitterly. "That's always how they explain it, isn't it? When a woman disappears, she ran away. When a man disappears, something terrible happened to him." "Her husband," said Padre Agostino, "is Giovanni Marchetti, a man well known in the region, a land trader with properties in 3 towns. He comes to Mass every Sunday, always sitting in the front pew." Padre Pio felt the blood freeze in his veins. "A pious man," he said, cutting irony in his voice. "Apparently," Padre Agostino agreed, "but you and I know better than anyone that the most dangerous demon is the one who dresses like an angel." That night, Padre Pio returned to the chapel earlier, even before compline. He lit the candles and knelt, waiting. He knew, with a certainty born of decades of spiritual experience, that Elena would return. Souls seeking justice always returned, and she did. This time, her form was more solid, more defined, as if the first visit had established a bridge between her world and his. She materialized near the altar, her hands still shielding her belly, her eyes still heavy with fear and sorrow. "Elena," Padre Pio said gently, without rising, without making any sudden movements, "you have returned." "I have nowhere else to go," she said, her voice a little stronger now. "The living have forgotten me. My family believed the lies. My mother thinks I abandoned her, that I ran away like a coward." "But you did not run away," Padre Pio affirmed. "No," Elena confirmed, and for the first time a spark of anger flashed in her dead eyes. "I did not run away. I was silenced." Padre Pio waited, giving her time, knowing that some truths were so painful they had to be drawn out word by word, like thorns driven deep into the flesh. "I was 4 months pregnant," Elena began, her voice trembling. "It was our first child. Giovanni and I, we thought we were happy, or at least I thought we were. I didn't know. I didn't know what he was capable of." "What did he do, my daughter?" Padre Pio asked gently. Elena closed her eyes, and when she opened them again, they were filled with a pain so deep it seemed like an abyss. "I had another woman, a woman in Foggia. I found out by accident. I found letters hidden in his desk, love letters, promises to leave everything behind to be with her." Padre Agostino nodded, understanding. The old sin of infidelity, so common, so destructive. "I confronted him," Elena continued. I said I would tell his family, that I would expose the truth. He had a reputation to maintain, businesses that depended on his image as an honorable man, and I was threatening to destroy everything. Did he threaten you? The friar asked. Worse, Elena whispered. He promised me that he loved me, that he would leave the other woman, that we would be a family. He said we needed to go to a special place to celebrate our new beginning, a property he owned in the mountains, isolated, where we could talk in peace. Padre Pio already knew how the story would end, but he needed her to speak the truth that had been buried with her body. We went there, Elena continued, her voice now almost mechanical, as if she were telling someone else's story. It was an old, abandoned house. He said he was thinking of renovating it. We went inside, and he went to the kitchen to get wine so we could toast. But when he came back, she stopped, her spectral body trembling violently. Padre Pio extended his hand, not touching her, but offering his presence as comfort. When he came back, she forced herself to continue. There was something in the wine, something he put in it. I drank only one sip, but it was enough. I felt my legs give way, my vision darken. I fell to the floor, and the last thing I saw was his face, looking at me without any emotion at all, as if I were a problem he was finally solving. Tears now streamed freely down Elena's face, shining even in the dim light of the chapel. I woke up hours later, maybe a day later, I don't know. I was in a basement, dark, damp. My whole body ached, and I could feel it. I could feel that something was wrong with the baby. There was blood, so much blood. Padre Pio closed his eyes, silently praying for the strength to keep listening, to bear witness to that suffering without looking away. He came down a few times, Elena said, her voice now completely devoid of emotion, as if she had shut herself off to survive the telling. He brought water, but no food. He said he was thinking about what to do, that he couldn't let me go, that I knew too much. I begged for my life, for my baby's life, but he just looked at me as if I were an inconvenience, Padre Pio finished bitterly. Worse, Elena said, as if I had never been human, as if I were nothing more than an obstacle in his path. How long were you there? The friar asked. 3 days, Elena replied. 3 days of pain, of bleeding, of feeling my baby die inside me. On the 3rd day, he came down one last time. He brought a bottle and a glass. He said it would be easier that way, more merciful, that he didn't want me to suffer. Padre Pio felt bile rise in his throat. He poisoned you? Elena nodded. Rat poison, mixed with liquor to disguise the taste. He held me down and forced me to drink it. I fought, but I was so weak, so weak. I felt the poison burn my throat, my stomach. He let go of me and went back up the stairs, locking the door behind him. And I died alone in that cold basement, clutching my womb, trying to protect a baby who was already dead. The silence that followed was absolute, crushing. Padre Pio remained kneeling, tears streaming down his bearded face, his gloved hands gripping the crucifix so tightly that the stigmata wounds bled through the fabric. "Where is your body, Elena?" he finally asked, his voice hoarse. "He buried me right there," she said, "in the basement. He dug a hole in the dirt floor and threw me in as if I were trash. Then he covered everything with fresh concrete. No one will ever find me. No one will ever know." "I know," Padre Pio said, finally rising and looking directly into Elena's spectral eyes. "And God knows, and the truth always finds a way to the light, no matter how deeply it is buried." Elena looked at him with a mixture of hope and despair. "But who will believe you, Father? He is a powerful, respected man. I am just a woman who ran away. My word, even coming from beyond death, is worth less than his." "Perhaps," Padre agreed,
But it will not be your word that condemns him, it will be his own. In the days that followed, Padre Pio began his silent investigation. He was not naive enough to go directly to the police with a story of ghostly visitations. He knew he needed something more concrete, more tangible. He began by discreetly speaking with the townspeople, asking seemingly innocent questions about the Marchetti family. What he discovered was revealing. Elena was not the first woman in Giovanni's life to disappear mysteriously. 15 years earlier, his first fiancée, a young woman named Sofia, had run away just days before the wedding. Her family never found her, and Giovanni, publicly devastated, had eventually married Elena. Padre Pio also discovered that the mountain property, the house where Elena had been held captive, was not registered in Giovanni's name, but in that of his older brother, who had died 3 years earlier. It was the perfect place to hide a crime. But the friar needed more. He needed something that would force the authorities to investigate. The answer came from an unexpected source. One night, while praying in the chapel, Padre Pio had a vision. This time it was not Elena, but another presence, stronger, more luminous. An angel, he realized, though he could not clearly see its form. And the angel showed him something. He saw Giovanni Marchetti sitting in his office, drunk, speaking with another man, a confidant perhaps, or an accomplice. And in his drunken carelessness, Giovanni confessed.
He spoke of Elena, of the need to solve the problem. He spoke of Sofia, of how it had been easier the first time. And the other man, horrified, silently decided that he could not bear that secret. The vision faded, and Padre Pio knew what he needed to do. It took 2 weeks, but eventually Giovanni's confidant came to Padre Pio. He was a man named Marco, an old school friend of Giovanni's who had become his accountant. He arrived at the convent at night, nervous, constantly glancing over his shoulder. "Father," he said, his voice trembling, "I need to confess." Padre Pio led him to the chapel and heard his confession. Marco told everything, the drunken conversations, the insinuations, the veiled threats Giovanni made whenever someone came too close to the truth about Elena's disappearance. "He said he buried her alive," Marco whispered, horrified. "He said she begged, but that he couldn't let her live, that she knew too much." Padre Pio gently corrected him. "He poisoned her, but only after keeping her prisoner for days, after allowing her to lose the baby she was carrying." Marco looked at him, stunned. "How do you know?" "Because she told me," Padre Pio said simply. And then, with Marco's permission, the friar went to the police. He did not speak of his visions, nor did he mention Elena's soul. He merely said that a man had come to confess to him, revealing information related to the disappearance of Elena Marchetti, and that there were reasons to investigate a property in the mountains. At first, the police were skeptical. Giovanni Marchetti was an influential man, a benefactor of the community. But Padre Pio was Padre Pio, and even the most skeptical respected the stigmatized friar. They agreed to investigate. It took 3 days of digging, but at last they found her. Beneath the basement's concrete, exactly where Elena had said she would be, they found her remains, and the remains of her baby still in her womb. The coroner's report confirmed rat poison in her body. The position of the bones suggested that she had been buried in a fetal position, curled around herself, protecting her child even in death. Giovanni Marchetti was arrested during Sunday Mass as he sat in the front pew, feigning piety. He denied everything, of course. He claimed he had never been to that property, that he knew nothing. But when confronted with Marco's testimony, when faced with the physical evidence, his facade began to crack. And then they did something he did not expect. They excavated the basement of his former family home, the one where he had lived before marrying Elena. And there, buried beneath what had once been a rose garden, they found Sofia, his first fiancée. Giovanni Marchetti collapsed. He confessed to everything, every sordid detail, every lie, every moment of calculated cruelty. He was sentenced to life in prison, and the town of San Giovanni Rotondo was left in shock upon discovering that the man they had considered pious was in fact a monster. On the night following Giovanni's arrest, Padre Pio returned to the chapel. He was exhausted, spiritually and physically drained, but he knew there was one final thing he needed to do. He knelt in his usual place and prayed. He prayed for Elena, for her baby, for Sophia, for all the victims of men who wore masks of respectability while committing evil. And then he felt her presence once more. Elena materialized before him, but this time she was different. There was light around her, soft yet undeniable. Her face was no longer marked by fear or pain, and in her arms, held close to her chest, was a baby, a small, luminous form wrapped in the same light that surrounded her. "Padre Pio," she said, her voice melodious, free of the weight of anguish. "You gave us peace. You gave us justice. You gave us a voice when we were silenced." Tears flowed freely down the friar's face. "It was God who brought you to me, my daughter. I was only the instrument." Elena smiled, and it was a smile of genuine joy. "I can go now. I can take my child home. He has a name now, you know. In heaven, all the unborn receive names. Mine is called Pietro." "Pietro," Padre Pio repeated, caressing the name with reverence. "Little Pietro, who never knew the earth, but who now knows heaven." "Thank you, Father," Elena said, her form beginning to dissolve into the light. "Thank you for not forgetting us, for not leaving us in silence." No soul is ever truly forgotten in the eyes of God, not even those the world tries to erase. Elena and little Pietro dissolved into the light, and the chapel was filled with a moment of impossible brilliance, as if heaven itself had opened to receive them. When the light faded, Padre Pio remained kneeling in silent prayer, knowing he had witnessed something sacred. The next morning, the friars found Padre Pio still in the chapel. He had not slept, yet he did not appear tired. There was a peace on his face that they rarely saw, even in a man so holy. On the altar, where Elena had first appeared, there were 2 white roses, fresh as if they had just been cut, though it was impossible for them to be there. One large and one small, mother and child, side by side. Padre Pio touched the petals with reverence and knew they were a sign. Elena and Pietro were at peace, finally home, finally free. That day he celebrated a special Mass, not only for Elena and Pietro, but for all women silenced throughout the centuries, for all mothers who lost their children to violence, for all the innocent whose deaths were hidden, whose stories were erased, whose voices were stifled. And when the Mass ended, he stood before the congregation and said, "Always remember, God sees what is done in the shadows. God hears the cries of the silenced, and God never, ever abandons the innocent. Justice may take time. It may seem as though it will never come, but it will come. For God is just, and his love for the little ones and the oppressed is infinite." The people left the church in silence, many with tears in their eyes, all sensing that something sacred had taken place there. Years later, after Padre Pio had departed this life, stories of the pregnant woman and her baby were still told in San Giovanni Rotondo. They said that on certain nights, when the moon was full, it was possible to see 2 luminous figures walking through the corridors of the convent, one tall and one small, hand in hand in eternal peace. And in the chapel where Padre Pio used to pray, white roses bloomed spontaneously on the altar, even in the harshest winter, a constant reminder that no soul is ever truly forgotten, no injustice remains hidden forever, and that God's love reaches even those who were taken from life before their time. Elena and Pietro, mother and son, had found their peace. And through their story, many other silenced victims found the courage to speak, knowing they would be heard, believed, and honored. For this is the promise of heaven, that every tear will be wiped away, every injustice will be made right, and all who are lost will be found. If this story touched your heart, share it so that more people may come to know the story of Elena and Pietro. Leave a comment. Is there a forgotten soul for whom you would like to pray today? Remember, in the eyes of God, no life is insignificant, no death goes unnoticed, and no soul is ever truly forgotten.